Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Nancy Boys channel. The horror drought that we've seen over the past few months continues, but we've been quite lucky that we've had a new series of Black Mirror, and I'm finally getting around today to doing a ranking of season 6, just to give you my thoughts on the 5 episodes that we got coming out at the beginning of June. I will say I'm very grateful for Black Mirror. It's not necessarily a show that I will go back and rewatch a lot of times. But as someone that finds a lot of frustration in kind of horror anthologies, I always find that a lot of the horror anthologies out there are never really that fully rounded. They don't always have a great payoff. I find with Black Mirror, there's always a pretty good payoff. There's always a kind of good sense of story. So as much as I'm going to critique some of the episodes in this session today, I don't think there are generally many bad episodes of Black Mirror. I think it's generally well made. It's well produced. So yeah, I think that's just good context. There's been a lot of criticism, I think, about this particular series because I would agree there is a kind of shift away from sort of technology angle that we've seen. Traditionally, the show's always been about future technologies, not too far, so that distant future stuff. And it definitely has been a shift in this series where actually we're just getting interesting stories about dark themes that aren't necessarily always technology related. I don't personally have a massive issue with that because my view is, well, if the show is entertaining, then the show is entertaining. But that said, I think when there is a particularly good technology angle, I think it does add to the episode and it does give it something special. So we'll come on to that. So anyway, starting my ranking, let's start with number 5. So my least favourite of the season, and this will be no surprise because this one has been pretty much the bottom of everyone's list, was Maisie Day. So Maisie Day was not bad, in terms of an entertaining sort of 40 minutes. I guess my criticism of it was there just wasn't a lot to it. And I think if we go back to sort of what we're talking about, the sort of lack of technology, this episode really just didn't really have anything. I think there was supposed to be a bit of commentary on sort of paparazzi and sort of paparazzi culture. But that's really it. It wasn't really diving into technology. It was very depressing that it was going for this nostalgia angle of what must have been around 2007, because that doesn't feel like that long ago to me. But apparently, we've done the 80s and 90s nostalgia, so we're seeing it doing 2000s. But in terms of Maisie Day, it was fine. I think there was enough intrigue to kind of motor it along and get us to the final payoff. And actually, I think the final payoff, and look, we're going to talk spoilers here because I think it's weird for you to watch this. Skip right to the end if you don't want spoilers, just to see which episodes I've ranked from best to worst, and then you can go straight to them and watch them. But obviously, the payoff here in Maisie Day was that the actress wasn't going through some sort of rehab. She was chained up and kind of in exile because she'd been bitten by a werewolf. So actually, I love the werewolf transformation scene. It was a real good throwback to An American Werewolf in London, which I'm a great fan of, as you know. But really, once you got to that point, it pretty much died a death. And I thought it ended in a very kind of like, well, that kind of happened kind of way. So ultimately, it just felt a bit like, fine. It was a very straight played horror story, I would say, with a couple of nice little twists. But yeah, I think in absence of any kind of technology angle, that one pretty much fell short for me. The next one is controversial because it's quite beloved from the reviews I've seen, and I really enjoyed it. But Joan is Awful is my number 4, and it's a funny one. It almost doesn't feel in a way like a real episode. It almost feels like an introduction to the season. It's really fun, the whole thing around Annie Murphy being a meta version of Salma Hayek, who's a meta version of Cate Blanchett. All those layers are really fun. It works really well, and you do kind of go with the story, and it's kind of interesting to see where it pans out. I guess my problem with it was, once you really start to think about the show and what it's doing, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I think you can really pull holes in it. And I'm not going to do that because I think it was supposed to be a kind of fun and breezy episode. But that's kind of all it was to me. It was fun and breezy, and it was kind of sort of ridiculous. But scratch the surface a little bit. The technology that's involved doesn't really make sense. And I get it. There's supposed to be this personalized content thing that they were hinting at. It just doesn't really explain why Joan's particular story was chosen and then became this big phenomenon amongst everyone. If we're supposed to believe that it was supposed to be like generated content, um, and I think ultimately the characters all got very quickly to the point where they just believed that Joan's story was on Netflix or Streamberry, as it's called. And yeah, I don't know, it just didn't feel that believable. And I'm a bit of a stickler for believability. It kind of fell apart for me because of that. Number three, I really struggled. I've gone back and forth on this. I think I'm going to go with Loch Henry. Um, I just thought Loch Henry was a really entertaining episode. And again, the actual technology aspect of Black Mirror wasn't hugely there. This was more a commentary on those really overproduced, very slick Netflix true crime documentaries. And that's fine. I just thought it was a really fun, entertaining watch, a little bit of a mystery. There was some intrigue there. It was kind of a genre that we all know about, those like drone shots of countryside and beautiful landscapes, and then you've got this central mystery. What I did think was interesting, though, is obviously they're supposed to be, we're supposed to be looking at sort of the cynicism of those and trying to turn a tragedy into something for entertainment. But actually, I think the main character was fully invested in that story. It was his hometown. It was a crime he was aware of. So it didn't feel necessarily like he didn't have, it felt like maybe he did have the right to make that show. And maybe that was a slight issue with it. But I thought it was generally very entertaining. It was very downbeat. It was very, very dark in terms of kind of how that plays out, but really entertaining. And I would watch Loch Henry. I think that sounds like a great show. And I really loved as well that the '90s recreations of that VHS news footage just looked bang on. That's kind of my era. I was a teenager when all that happened, and it's really kind of cool, but also a bit weird and a bit scary to see the '90s in that kind of retro fashion. But ultimately, I think it was a great episode. Number two will be controversial because it doesn't seem to have gone down well with the rest of the fandom. This one will be at the bottom of the list, but Demon 79 is my second favourite, and actually it's the only one so far that I've watched twice because I made my partner's mum watch it last weekend. So Demon 79 I just liked, and for rightly or wrongly, I have a weird, oddly cozy obsession with 70s Britain, and it's bleak and it's brown and beige looking, but there's something oddly kind of comforting about it. And I loved the setting to start with. I just thought it was pitch perfect. It looked 70s. The way it was filmed was great. But the cast, I mean, the two leads in this, I just thought elevated that story so much. And Nida in particular, I just thought she was so likable and such a fun villain because she wasn't really a villain, but she kind of had to be by sort of virtue of the story. And I thought it was really fun. You kind of felt the stakes. On a second rewatch, I would say it definitely felt longer, and it probably needed to be trimmed. I would have probably taken a good 20 minutes out of it, and it was slightly too long from my taste. But really fun. I kind of really enjoyed the styling of it and the humour behind it. And I know that Charlie Brooker has talked about Red Mirror, this sort of new horror sort of sideways franchise to Black Mirror potentially being a thing. And this was the first Red Mirror episode. So I really, really can't wait for that. As I said at the beginning, I really always have high hopes for horror anthologies, and they pretty much always let me down. So if we can get Charlie Brooker and his team doing really good, tight 40 minute to an hour short films, short horror movies, then I'm fully invested in that. And if we get more of what we got in Demon 79, I'll be very happy. I also love the little shout out to Threads right at the end. And if you haven't seen Threads, go and check it out. It's just one of the most depressingly awful, terrifying horror films of all time. And it's not a horror film. It's actually a sort of BBC sort of fake documentary from the 70s. But it's just really well done. And there's a lot of kind of echoes of that. Which you'll see, and if you know Threads, you're going to recognise that when you saw Demon 79. But great episode, kind of just right up my street, right? Sort of the thing I enjoy. So I get it. It's not going to be for everyone. I just thought it was a hell of a lot of fun. And then no big surprises. Number one for me was Beyond the Sea. And again, this seems to be at the top of most people's lists. I think what I really liked about Beyond the Sea was just, again, I talked at the beginning about how I don't necessarily mind the technology thing not being present. But I think when Charlie Brooker gets that technology angle right, it makes the episode work so well. And I think this technology was probably the most believable, and one of the most believable sort of technological aspects we've ever seen in a Black Mirror episode. The fact that there's a real practical application to enable physical avatars on Earth when those physical people are out in the world doing other things. That felt so believable to me, especially, as we've just come out of lockdown and we've needed that closeness. We've wanted to feel that intimacy of just being with someone. It was kind of like a great commentary on lockdown without them really having to specify it. And then it just really worked. And I remember 15, 20 minutes into the episode, obviously, we know what happens to Josh Hartnett's character, and it's quite horrific. But then the implications of that and what that's going to lead to when the avatars start swapping and, the characters are allowed to start coming to Earth in this different body, it just started to open up all the possibilities of where this story could go and what kind of implications it could have. And I just thought that really strengthened the story. It made it feel really believable. I thought the cast was great as well. Just, again, very, very human. There was just a kind of, just a lovely quality to it. Yeah, and I thought it was great to see Josh Hartnett. It's been a while since I've seen him anything that's very different now, because he's 20 years older than probably, seeing him in like Halloween H2O when he was at his peak. Kate Mara was great as the kind of wife character, but Aaron Paul was just bang on. To play two characters and for you to see the difference in both of them, I just thought he did it so well. And there's a scene where he breaks down as this other character, which, again, just elevates that whole episode, because that episode is just, it's the performances that elevate it, plus that real strong technological angle where you could think, I could see that happening. That makes so much sense of why that would have a practical application in the real world. And that's what I mean. I said at the beginning about technology. It doesn't need to be there to make it a fun episode, but when it is there and it's good, it makes Black Mirror so much better in terms of what it's trying to achieve and what it's trying to do. So I think it has been an odd season. I think they have started to veer away from that. And I don't know whether that was a conscious choice on Charlie Brooker's part. I'm not terribly mad about it. I thought it worked really well. So that's my top 5. I would love to hear what you think. I know that some of that will be very controversial. Jonah's Awful, I thought, would never get to sort of my second least favourite. And it's not to say I didn't enjoy it. I just thought there was a lot of interesting stuff in this season. So check it out. Leave some comments below if you want to challenge me. But remember, it's my opinion, so be nice. Let me know what you thought of Black Mirror Season 6. And I'll see you in the next one.